Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second webinar in our three-part Embracing Carer series. This series is brought to you by Can Do Multiple Sclerosis and EMD Serono. Tonight's webinar will focus on caring for the carers, wellness priorities for support partners. My name is Rachel Lottie, Programs Coordinator for Can Do MS, and I'll be your moderator this evening. Embracing Carers is an initiative led by EMD Serono in collaboration with leading caregiver organizations around the world to increase awareness and action about the often overlooked needs of caregivers. The series will include 3 webinars and 3 corresponding podcasts designed specifically for support partners. You can find information about upcoming webinars and podcasts on our website, cando-ms.org/EC. If you have any technical difficulties during the call, you can contact the GoToWebinar attendee support line at 877-582-7011. This presentation is being recorded and will be archived on the Can Do MS website. We will save about 15 minutes at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. If you have a question during the presentation, you can type it in using the questions chat box found in your control panel. You can download a copy of tonight's presentation from your control panel. We will also email you the presentation slides and a recording 24 hours after this broadcast. Our speakers tonight include nurse practitioner Cheryl Blaschuk from Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, psychologist Roz Kalb from West Bath, Maine, and physical therapist Mandy Rohrig from Omaha, Nebraska. And these ladies represent 3 of the key players on your MS care team. I do want to mention that our nurse practitioner Cheryl is her webcam is down tonight, so you will not be seeing her, you will just be hearing her audio. And I also wanted to mention about Cheryl that not only is she going to provide some information from a nurse practitioner standpoint, but Cheryl is also a support partner for her husband who is living with MS. So now I'd like to turn the program over to Roz to see what they have planned for the presentation. So Roz, what are tonight's learning objectives?
Thank you, Rachel, and welcome everybody. We're glad you're here. Tonight, support partners and people with MS are going to become familiar with 3 key areas of self-care. And you're all going to understand the importance of taking care of oneself as a care partner makes you a better care partner. Taking care of yourself is not at all selfish. It is self-sustaining. In other words, it's essential for your own wellness. And both you and your partner with MS are going to have changing health and wellness needs over the course of time and over the course of the disease. So we have a lot to cover tonight. Before we get started, I just want to say something about language. As you notice, the European program that is sponsoring all of these initiatives around the country refer to support partners as carers. That is a European term. It's used very commonly all throughout Europe. At Can Do, we talk about support partners or care partners. Some people prefer simply to be referred to as a spouse or a friend or a child, and they don't want any label at all, or to be called a loved one. Caretaker we tend to avoid because one of my dear colleagues said we only talk about caretakers for cemeteries, and it's not appropriate in this. But as you listen to these conversations tonight, just think about how you think of yourself in your support partner role. What term is most comfortable for you? Because that's the term you want to use when you talk to other people to educate them about your role. So now, Cheryl, would you like to introduce us to our real life scenario?
Okay, thank you, Roz. I'd like to introduce you to Sam and Pam. I'll go through these slides and bullet points a little quickly, but please keep them in mind as we go through this presentation. So Sam and Pam have been married for 18 years and they have a 10-year-old daughter. Sam is 42 and he was diagnosed with MS about 20 years ago. He's a manager at a local bank and a primary breadwinner for the family. Right now, he's currently suffering some weakness, balance, which are contributing to more frequent falls, and he's reluctant to use any kind of an assistive device. Fatigue tends to limit his activities at home and with his family, and he also has bladder, bowel unpredictability, and some subtle cognitive changes. Pam is our caregiver, support partner. She is 40 years old. She's a full-time respiratory therapist, so she works in healthcare. She does have some other health issues, including some mild low back pain. They live in an area where she has many good friends, but they do not have any family locally. She is the primary responsibilities for parenting and doing all the homemaking. She's exhausted. She needs more help, and she's very worried about the future. She would like to speak to Sam's doctors about his falls. So that kind of gives you an overview of a lot of families that I see on a regular basis in our practice. This is not an uncommon scenario. So anyway, so we'll circle back to them a little bit later, and now we'll have Mandy step up to give us a little more information in regards to wellness. Thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Welcome, everyone. So let's kind of step back and think more broadly. What is wellness? Well, the definition of wellness, how we define it at CanDo, is a lifelong journey through which people make positive choices about their behaviors, lifestyle, and activities, with an overarching goal to thrive or to live this optimal life. And while we're an organization that focuses on people who have MS, we also focus a lot on wellness for support partners as well. And we believe that everyone who's living with MS, both people with MS and their support partners, can achieve this optimal wellness. So we like to break down wellness into 6 dimensions. So we're using this beautiful autumn tree to be seasonal, but also be appropriate for what we're talking about today. So the 6 dimensions of wellness that we identify are diet, exercise, and healthy behaviors. So this is pretty intuitive. This refers to observing a healthy diet, participating in regular exercise, participating in those regular primary care visits with your healthcare team. Emotional well-being is the second one, and that refers to more about developing coping strategies and managing stress while at the same time being sensitive and aware to mood and issues such as depression or anxiety, and then also at the same time kind of trying to maybe develop some resilience in while you're managing a disease that's ever changing and unpredictable. Spirituality is the 3rd dimension of wellness that we look at, and this is just developing a kind of a worldview about peace and harmony. It may or may not be related to religion, but it's just that overall sense of peace. The next one is cognitive well-being, and this refers to engaging in more mentally stimulating activities, both at work, at home, and in the community. The next one is work and home, and that is participating in meaningful activities that give you a sense of purpose, that give you some drive, that give you a reason to get up in the morning and do activities. And the last, but certainly not the least dimension of wellness is relationships. And this is just defining relationships as those positive, healthy relationships that give us a lot of energy and promotes meaningful and engaging conversations and a meaningful lifestyle with one another. So some pretty lofty goals, right? Right. So why, Roz? Why is achieving wellness so incredibly difficult, especially for support partners?
Well, I think we hear about a lot of barriers to taking care of oneself. We hear it from people living with MS and also from support partners. But I think some of the most common barriers we hear have to do with time and energy. People feel like they simply have too much to do in a day and not enough time to do the things that are important to them. or by the time they've taken care of all the things they have to do, checked everything off their list, there's not an ounce of energy left to focus on themselves. We also hear from support partners that they're so focused on the needs of their partner with MS that it doesn't leave much time or space to think about what their own wellness needs might be, or in fact, they say that they feel selfish if they focus on themselves because, of course, they're not the ones who have MS. We hope we're going to turn that thinking around tonight. Feeling selfish just doesn't have a place here. And I'm just trying to get through the day. And people will say, I'm just trying to put one foot in front of the other, and that's a success if I get to the end of the day. And so wellness often takes a back seat. So before we start to problem solve some of this, let's do our first polling question, because we'd really like to know from you which one of these tends to be your biggest barrier. So the biggest number of folks, 39%, really say it's just a lack of energy. There's no energy left after everything is done. And the others are pretty evenly divided. So I think we've captured the most common, and I hope that by the end of tonight, you'll have some thoughts about how you can address that for yourself. So now that we're aware of the most common barriers, Cheryl, which of the areas of wellness that Mandy talked about are we going to be focusing on tonight?
So thank you, Roz. Tonight we're going to focus on 3 areas of wellness, as you can see in the slide, and we used a stool to represent that because it is a 3-legged stool, has a very strong base of support. So the 3 areas that we look at in terms of wellness and self-care include medical wellness, physical wellness, and emotional and social wellness. So medical wellness is basically, I address these conditions in looking at them from a nurse practitioner standpoint or perspective. So some things to consider with medical wellness for the support partner include preventive health care, managing health conditions, managing your own health issues. Think back to our story of Sam and Pam, because that will come up. Stop smoking if you are, and make sure that you're eating healthy. And weight management. I think those are things that we all struggle with. And we also included sleep, because I think that is a critical piece that seems to be ignored and is getting a lot more attention most recently related to the impact of chronic sleep deprivation. So, okay, moving along. So this slide is kind of a basic overview, basically looking at men and women related to preventive care. You can see that both sides basically address the same issues, except for gender-specific self-breast exam and for males, prostate exam. What I wanted to tell you is that there's specific ages for all of these various examinations. And if we go to the next slide, this is from the CDC, Center for Disease Control website. And they also list these various areas, blood pressure, diabetes, for testing, cancer screenings, again, interventions that may be needed, such as smoking cessation or weight loss, dietary management, screenings for other things such as sexually transmitted diseases if appropriate, regular just wellness visits, and at this point we did not address anything specific to pregnancy, and also to include vaccinations. Vaccinations also apply to adults, and there are a few vaccinations that are available for people as they age. If you go to this website, you can actually plug in your age, and you can then find out which of all of these screenings are appropriate based on your age. So that's a very nice website if you'd like to do that. So next, please. So managing the carers or the support partner's own health conditions, can be a very challenging area. None of us are getting younger, and all of us may develop some other health issues as we go through our journeys here. So what happens oftentimes is the support partner tends to focus, of course, on the needs of the person with MS, and oftentimes doesn't pay attention to their own health. They tend to ignore their own ailments and neglect regular medical examinations, oftentimes because for the simple reason they don't have enough energy. Appointments for their loved one oftentimes becomes more important than their own appointments. So, but keep in mind that a person with MS needs a healthy support partner in order to be able to actually provide the best possible care. It includes physical and emotional support for both of the partners. So, thank you. And next slide, please. So smoking, please stop if you are. That's the one thing we ask you to do today. I don't think smoking has any really good benefits, so, and if you haven't heard most of these before, but smoking can be related to cancers, heart disease, lung disease. Again, there's increased risk of smoking during pregnancy and complications. We did put a small blurb in here related to e-cigarettes. The bottom line is when we look at the evidence, we don't really have any evidence indicating that that it's of any benefit or that it's of any risk, but we don't have enough information to really have anything to say in terms of long-term effects. And with that in mind, our recommendation is actually just to not do e-cigarettes at this point. We don't have evidence that they actually help smokers quit smoking. That's been brought up, but we don't have real hard evidence on that. And related to more specifically what smoking can do to and how it can affect patients with MS, if the patient is an active smoker, it can actually cause acceleration in progression, in MS progression. So, and also oftentimes can move patients from more of a relapsing remitting to more of a progressive course. Passive smoke is another thing to think about. If there's a smoker in your house, and even if you are yourself are not the smoker, it can increase or can correlate with an increased risk of a child developing MS. So if you are a smoker and you have children in your home, you might want to think about that. So, and again, it can even as a passive smoker, it can also affect your MS and cause a progression of MS. So even if the person with MS is not smoking, if they inhale smoke from somebody else, it also increases the risk of progression of their MS. So next slide, please. So weight management and eating healthy. This is probably one of our big hot topics in the world of multiple sclerosis, but it's very important, again, for both partners, but specifically for the support partner. It's not as simple as it sounds. What I did do is I looked at the dietary guidelines for Americans, at the Center for Disease Control website, and basically they emphasize fruits, vegetables, whole grains, fat-free or low-fat milk and milk products, lean meats, fish, eggs, and nuts, and again, people can have specific things that they may or may want to choose from those lists. And a diet that's had high and low saturated fats is low in saturated fats or trans fats, cholesterol, or salt. There's been some evidence that salt may also affect multiple sclerosis in terms of progression, and we know that anything with added sugars is probably not good for us, and as a country, I think we're learning that. So, and then sticking within your daily caloric needs. Easier said than done, but perhaps if weight and eating are a concern, I would request a consult from a nutritionist or dietitian to help both the support partner and the patient with MS. So, then next. So, sleep. How can MS affect people's sleep or support partners specifically? We kind of rethought this question. At first, we kind of looked at, some general recommendations for sleep, but we decided to look a little more specifically at how would a care partner's sleep be affected when living with their partner who has multiple sclerosis. So the multiple sclerosis person may actually have a lot of spasticity, which can be disrupting also for the bed partner, okay? How would we deal with that? Why, we would perhaps ask for a referral to physical therapy you could come and see me, and I could certainly do that, particularly for the patient, to see if we can help work and better manage those issues so that the care partner is not disruptive. Bladder issues, waking up frequently to go to the bathroom at night. Again, you can start with your care provider or look for a referral possibly to a urologist or a subspecialist to address those issues and help better manage those issues so that the care partner and the MS person also has a decent sleep. Stress, again, psychologist, stress is sort of individual, but it can certainly affect people's sleep. Mobility issues, again, repositioning perhaps a loved one at night who has MS and cannot turn over themselves. Those issues can be addressed sort of in a joint physical therapy session and helping have a physical therapist help you learn how to do those things. So, and this time issues, one of the things that was brought up that I'm personally very familiar with is sort of that time for yourself. And as a care partner, you do have a tendency, or at least I have seen, to either stay up late or get up real early just to have some alone time or some quiet time. And that can ultimately affect your amount of time that you do actually sleep. So those are some interesting things to think about.
Hey, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Just wanted to add, as I was looking at this, we forgot to mention depression, which we know is common in both people with MS and in support partners. And depression can be very disruptive of sleep. So that people can have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. So it's just one other thing to consider if sleep is very interrupted. And again, a mental health professional can help you tease out if that might be contributing to sleep problems, whether you're a person with MS or a support partner.
So thank you, Roz. Okay, well, on to our next area. So what we thought we'd do is ask a quick question related to what impacts your sleep the most. And you can look at these three answers and tell us what you think. Well, I think we know stress. That seems to win hands down. The other two issues, including a loved one's specific symptoms at night or sort of the time needed to take care of yourself, that alone time or downtime seem to be about evenly distributed, but stress and stress management seems to be the biggest issue. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the program too. And we'll also be giving you resources. At the end of this program, we'll be giving you some more resources related to smoking, cessation, etc. We have a whole bunch of them at the end of the program. So, okay, well, so I think we're going to move on to physical wellness now, and I'd like to have Mandy take over.
Great. That was some really wonderful information, Cheryl. Thank you so much. I also think it's important to just state that anytime any of you, whether it's the support partner or the person with MS, whether someone feels that MS symptoms are somehow impacting function or influencing life, just tell somebody on the healthcare team. Even if it's not that particular discipline that could directly help that symptom or directly manage that symptom, they can at least refer you to someone who may be able to help you or guide you to help manage it more effectively. So just as a side note. But let's talk about physical wellness. So when we talk about physical wellness, I kind of like to divide this into two categories. The first category is physical safety, and the second category is exercise and physical activity. So when we talk about physical safety, I like to think about kind of the role of the support partner and the relationship before MS. Often support partners before MS didn't really have to help with a lot of the physical responsibilities, and now perhaps they're helping with transfers, or they're aiding with walking, or maybe they're just simply doing more physically labor-intensive responsibilities around the home because of the MS fatigue that their loved one is experiencing. So that can make them more susceptible to some orthopedic issues. And some of the orthopedic issues listed here, including shoulder pain or low back pain, are some of the ones that I see and I hear about most commonly as a physical therapist. The example I like to use most is when the support partner is aiding ambulation. So the person with MS is hanging on to the arm or the shoulder of their loved one. And over time, that can cause shoulder pain, can cause low back issues, even if it's not today or even tomorrow, it may be in the future. So this is a good opportunity to intervene with suggesting the role of an assistive device and how that can be beneficial for actually both the person living with MS and the support partner. And rethinking how adaptive equipment and assistive devices can be used as tools for both helping optimize independence for the person with MS, but then also helping to preserve the physical wellness of the support partner. So again, there's a benefit for both. Second component of physical wellness would be the exercise and physical activity. And actually we'll dive into this a little bit more, but we'll talk about the components of an exercise program and how we can prioritize exercise and physical activity into the busy schedules of our loving support partners. But the key message overall is that support partners can use physical therapy as a tool to help them manage some of their challenges secondary or related to MS. So let's talk a little bit about some of the tools and tips. Now, certainly this slide is not comprehensive, all the tools and gadgets and tips and strategies that physical therapy and rehabilitation professionals can offer, but these are just a few key ones. So the two gait belt images, I would say that's probably one of the most underutilized tools that can be beneficial to support partners. Again, rather than grabbing onto a shoulder or an arm of a loved one, the person with MS can use an assistive device and the support partner can use a gait belt. Everyone's safer, everyone is more independent, and again, can benefit all involved. The sliding board or the transfer board is that center image, and that can help with transferring from one surface to another. Again, the person with MS can kind of scooch and shimmy independently, or the support partner can also aid that as well. Again, optimizing independence while preserving the physical wellness for that support partner.
Hey, Mandy, could you say a little bit more about how the gait belt is used so people can picture what's happening with it?
Sure. So gait belts can be used, the word gait means walking, but gait belts are not just used exclusively for walking. This is a good question, Roz. So gait belts wrap around, generally around the waist, about the height of where your pants would be. I often even use, if you don't want to use a gait belt, just have your loved one with MS wear a regular belt if the image of a gait belt isn't something that people prefer. But you would hang on to the back, kind of at the small of the person with MS, their back, and that allows you to provide a little bit of support, whether it be balance or whether it be a little bit of extra oomph to help them with the transfer. And the difference between the one that you see on the far, which would be our left, versus the black one on the right is your ability to hold the belt itself versus holding loops, which gives you the person with MS a little more opportunity to balance and stabilize on their own. Yeah. So some tools that could be used, and then the techniques are the two images on the bottom. So the lifting, the pivot transfer image that you see the person who's supporting them, the wheelchair is parallel to the bed, nice wide base of support. You see them bending at the hips and knees. Generally, when you transfer, and this is something that's so key, if you can transfer from a higher surface to a lower surface, that makes it a lot easier so you're not having to work against gravity. And most importantly, communicate. Try to set yourself up for success so that when you're ready to make the move, that the team is ready to move together. And then you also see the image of how you can use a bed sheet to help with repositioning, specifically rolling. But again, I think the key is that use those PTs to help you problem solve which tools, what techniques, and when they could be beneficial for your lives. Because like everything in MS, it's very individualized. So there's not a one size fits all. But Roz, do you mind just sharing a few tips for people, or give us a little bit of insider advice as to why sometimes it's hard for people to recognize when assistive devices and tools might be beneficial for the support partner?
Sure. It's a great question, and I think along with what Mandy's been saying about support partners needing to pay attention to their own physical well-being so that they reduce the risk of neck pain and back pain, it's important for partners to be able to talk to each other about using assistive devices as a tool. And what often gets in the way of these conversations is a perception that using a mobility aid or an assistive device is giving in to MS, that it's admitting that MS has changed things sufficiently that you can't do the things you used to do before. And while we acknowledge that there's a certain healthy grieving process that goes along with making these changes, I think there are a couple ways to think about it that can be very helpful. First of all, at Can Do MS, we think about the use of all kinds of resources, tools, assistive devices as strategies to take charge of MS as opposed to giving into it. That you are really making a proactive decision to conserve energy, to make life easier for both of you, and to engage in more shared activities because now you have more energy using mobility aids. I think also sometimes people worry that if they use a mobility aid like a walker or a scooter or a wheelchair, that somehow that will compromise their ability to walk. And we always are reminding people that if you sit down in a scooter, your butt isn't glued to the seat. You can use a scooter to go long distances and conserve energy so that when you get where you want to go, whether it's in a shopping mall or a museum or the zoo, you can get up and walk as long as you're comfortable doing it. So it's again, enabling you to do more of what you want to do. And I think Mandy will back me up when I say walking from point A to point B and exhausting yourself is not the optimal form of exercise. We really want you to get a good exercise program to enhance your mobility and use mobility aids to get from place to place.
That's well said. And I do, just to echo that too, Roz, I think if it's not the right mobility aid or if it's not the right piece of equipment, you'll know it. You'll know it. And that's when we need to go back to the rehab team and say, hey, we have to try some more options. And you'll know when the right one comes about. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and it's a polling question for all of you. How many minutes of aerobic exercise should a support partner get each week? So this is interesting, 90 minutes and 150 minutes with 120 minutes not being far behind. So actually the recommended amount of aerobic exercise for people is 150 minutes per week. So this is about 30 minutes per day or 30 minutes 5 days a week. So it might seem a bit like a lot for a lot of us, right? It's something to strive for and it's something to try to achieve. But let's talk about what the big goals are and the big guidelines and recommendations are, and then we'll talk about a little bit more how to realistically fit these into life. So some of the exercise guidelines, and again, this is kind of the gold star aspiring recommendations, to get 150 minutes of aerobic exercise a week, and this means getting your heart and lungs up to about 60 to 80% of its maximal heart rate. Try also to fit some strength training in 2 to 3 times a week. Try to do some flexibility exercises daily, and then to also incorporate some balance exercises. And I'm a physical therapist, and when I look at this list, I think, whew, that's a lot, right? Like that is a lot to ask on top of all of the responsibilities that support partners have. So it's difficult. It's difficult to try to fit it in. And I'm going to say it again, support partners can use physical therapy for this reason. Outsource this to us and help us figure out a way for you to exercise, to prioritize exercise. This isn't something that you have to do on your own.
But Mandy, I'm sure you have some quick tips before people can get themselves to a physical therapist. You have some quick tips on how to fit this large number of minutes into a busy, exhausting day?
Yeah, I think it's key to not overwhelm yourself with all 30 minutes all at one time. That can be broken up throughout the day and can still be effective. I also think it's really important to have the conversation with the person living with MS that, hey, you know what, this is a priority to me. This is something I need to do. This is something I need you to help me support me with, and then work together to try to carve out that little bit of time. But while exercise is important, Roz's question does a nice job of leading us into something called physical activity. So if exercise and finding that 30 minutes and finding that time for true structured exercise, you can also consider physical activity, and this is just as beneficial. So physical activity is just any movement that you can do, honestly, beyond sitting, beyond that seated stationary position. It can be leisure activities like gardening, cooking, cleaning, if that's considered a leisure activity to any of you. But it's just getting up and moving beyond that seated position. So that counts. That counts in addition to physical exercise or in replacement for physical exercise. Next slide. So incorporating physical activity is a choice. So to Roz's point, sometimes it takes a lot of effort. And I like this because it shows that we often have a choice. We're often at a crossroads. Do we take the escalator or do we take the stairs? There are some escalator days and there are some stair days, and we acknowledge that. But we hope that you can start thinking about how to give yourself more stair days than escalator days. Go ahead, next slide, please. So again, how to fit more physical activity, how to fit more movement into your day. So is sitting the new smoking? Sitting disease was kind of a phrase or a term that was coined by some, the medical community, that just refers to kind of the metabolic syndrome that often is correlated to an overly sedentary lifestyle. So it's associated with some increased risk for cancers, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, orthopedic issues. Whereas conversely, standing more often or trying to move more often beyond that seated sedentary position can have a number of benefits. Some research even suggested that if you sit for more than 20 minutes, your metabolism starts to slow. So as we've all been sitting here listening to one another, we're slowing down. Our metabolisms are slowing down. But we'll give you an opt-out tonight because we're learning a lot. So standing a little extra during the day, maybe setting some alarms on your phone or just making a point to move around intermittently through the day can help to minimize these risks. But exercising that recommended 150 minutes, it does not compensate for being inactive and sedentary during the day. So again, physical activity is okay, even when you can't fit that exercise in.
And if you want to go to a real extreme, you can hook your television set up to an elliptical. So that in order for the TV to work, you have to be moving the elliptical. We knew a guy who did this with his family, and it actually worked because they wanted to watch TV, so they pedaled on that elliptical quite a bit.
That's a great idea. And you know what? Television and anything that you can do to distract yourself, if exercise is something that you dread, use those distractions to your advantage, or power your home with your movement. So whatever you need to do. But just some ideas, some suggestions for how to sneak movement into your day. You know, parking the car further away, standing during commercials on TV. There are lots of standing desks. I even have some patients who have MS who've been able to get their standing desk covered by their employers at work. So you never know. You just have to ask those questions. Dancing in the car at stoplights. I've got 3 little kids, and we often crank the music and get moving. movement alarms. There are plenty of those with technology nowadays. And one of our favorites was actually a contribution from one of our participants at a program. I believe it was when his coffee was brewing in the morning, he would stop, drop, and do some planks, which is a core strengthening exercise. So again, using those little pockets of time that you might have during the day and optimizing them to your advantage is a good strategy to get some exercise. And again, outsource some of this to your PT. You don't have to brainstorm and think of all of this on your own. So last, but certainly not least, while it's important to partake in physical activity and exercise independently, and there's a lot of value in that, there really is a lot of value in doing exercise and physical activity together. So these are some great images showing something as extreme as it looks like surfing that gentleman's doing in the upper left-hand corner, and in the lower right-hand corner we have someone on an adapted canoe with some pontoons on the side to help with stability and balance. And then our founder, Jimmy Huga, he's sit skiing in the center. You know, lots of options when it comes to adaptive sports like that. But you don't even have to go to that extent if you don't want to. In the upper right-hand corner, we have a couple that's doing some adaptive tandem bicycling, recumbent bicycling, which is really great if you want to exercise along with your loved one who has MS. When they get tired, you can kind of jump in and take the lead. And then even on a simpler level, to Roz's point, like she spoke of earlier, using a scooter so that the person without MS can be walking or jogging, and the person who has MS can be riding along, and you still get to have that joy of togetherness, but you still get to have that joy of togetherness, but again, with tools. So I think that the big ticket with this is that often to do physical activity together, you need those tools. So those tools do encourage that togetherness. So think about that. All right, now hopefully we're on the right path with physical wellness, and Roz is going to get us thinking a little bit more about how to incorporate emotional wellness into the lives of support partners.
Thanks, Mandy. So the topics that we're going to spend a little time talking about tonight are the importance of support partners building your own support network. This is not all about the person with MS. You also need support from other people. And you need to recognize what your own needs are, emotional, physical, health, so that you can communicate them to the people in your support network. It's very important to pay attention to your own mood. We focus a lot on the moods and the mood changes in people with MS, but we know that support partners deal with a lot of stress, anxiety, and certainly depression. As you indicated in the poll, stress can keep you awake at night. So paying attention to that and reaching out for help. This is where a mental health professional or a counselor can really help you identify the key sources of stress in your life, but also help you find the stress management strategies that work best for you. It's a little bit of trial and error. There are lots of strategies out there for managing stress, but it's as individual as every other aspect of life with a chronic illness. So as a support partner, you need to find what works for you. Planning for unpredictability is a wonderful way to start to counter that stress, because my experience with support partners is a lot of the stress is what's going to happen next, when's the next shoe going to drop, how are we going to deal with this, what's going to happen down the road, can we manage it? And so planning for unpredictability can really relieve a lot of that stress. And most important, to recognize when you need some assistance and reach out for it. So support partners should definitely speak with their healthcare provider or with their loved one's neurologist and about needing some help and getting a referral. And also, the National MS Society has this magic 800 number, and whether you're a person with MS or a support partner or any family member, you can call an MS navigator and ask for assistance, support, information about respite options in your community, referrals to any of the disciplines. So it's just important to start with focusing on what your own needs are and figuring out where to go to get help. Next slide, please. And what we're really going for here is for support partners to find balance in their own lives. So often it gets the center of gravity gets shifted so that all of the attention is on the needs of the person with MS. And we really want to get things back into more balance so that the needs of support partners take equal weight, get equal attention, equal resources. And again, when you get on an airplane, the first thing that the flight attendant says, if there's a drop in oxygen in the cabin, oxygen mask will come down and you put on your own before you assist the person next to you. And this is a really helpful image for people who worry that taking care of their own needs is being selfish. As Cheryl mentioned, you can't be a healthy, effective support partner, let alone a healthy person, if you don't take care of yourself before you try to take care of somebody else. Also, everybody talked about having no energy in the pull, and that's because people are pulled in so many directions and have so many responsibilities. But frequently you can talk with a mental health professional to actually figure out how to juggle your roles and commitments, how to figure out what are your top priorities, what are the things you're doing because they're most important to you, and what are the things you're doing just because you think you should or somebody is telling you you should. Your own ability to juggle your roles and commitments will help you have a more balanced lifestyle. So now I want to do a little exercise with all of you. And this first question is for those of you living with MS. So I want you to picture that you have a pie in front of you, like an apple pie or blueberry pie, but this is a life pie. And I want you to think about how big a piece of your life pie is MS. Now, this is just for people who have MS. 75%, that's interesting. The others are very close to each other, but 75%. So that's a big portion of the pie. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing for support partners. Same question. If you are a support partner, how big a piece of your pie is MS? 25%, 50. Okay, so most people say about 25%, and then 50 and 75% are close behind. So I just want to tell you one interesting story. We did this exercise at a Can-Do program recently, and people did this activity at their tables without showing each other their answers. And when one couple shared their answers with each other, the wife who had MS got very teary, and she said, "I am so relieved because I have been feeling so guilty that my MS has ruined his life, is taking over his life, that he doesn't have any time for himself." And his answer to this question was 20%. And so actually sharing this information was a huge relief to her. And I encourage you all to do this periodically at home. It takes 30 seconds, as you can see, and it can start some really good conversations about whether MS is taking over more of your lives, whether you're a person with MS or a support partner, than you want it to be. Next slide, please. And so for those of you who feel as though MS is 75% of your life space, 80%, just an overwhelming amount, whether you're an individual with MS or a support partner, I encourage you to look for what I call your MS free zone. And it's that part of yourself that is unaffected by MS. It might be your sense of humor, or your religious faith, or your love of playing games, or hanging out with friends. Doesn't matter what it is, but it's a part of you that is very emotionally sustaining. it enables you to re-energize yourself. When you engage in those activities that are not impacted by your MS, they give you the emotional energy and refueling that you need to keep up with the challenges in your everyday life. So talk to each other about what you think your MS-free zones are and how you might cultivate those in some of those activities that Mandy was talking about. Cheryl, Rachel mentioned that you, in addition to being a nurse practitioner who works in MS, that you are also a support partner for your husband who has MS. So I'm curious, how have you been able to find an MS-free zone in a life that is so involved with MS?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Roz. It is challenging, and I do have kind of a unique, although there are other people like me out there in the world who are also providers of care, and from a professional standpoint, and also providers of care from a personal standpoint. But in terms of an MS-free zone, one of the things that I always think about is that I'm blessed that I sort of have lived and grown and work and play in pretty much the same geographical area, which has provided me with some very long-term friendships over the years. And so those people are critical for me in terms of time with them. And I'm also lucky that my partner and my spouse is able to manage himself at home if I'm gone away for a few days, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, I think, one of the biggest things for me is I have a lot of a wonderful support program. I don't have a big family, nor does my husband, but we have I have wonderful friends that I've been able to endure for over 30 years, and that I think is probably the most valuable piece for me in terms of an MS-free zone.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, next slide. Now we're going to go through these next couple quickly because the next webinar in this series that Cheryl and I are actually going to be doing together is about relationships and maintaining healthy relationships. But I just want to quickly mention that one of the things that's really important in your relationship is to keep your partnership balanced, even if your roles have to shift because of MS symptoms or you take on different responsibilities. The goal is to figure out together how to keep things balanced so that you each feel like you're giving and receiving in the relationship. If it starts to get out of whack, where one person feels he or she is doing all of the caring and giving and providing, that doesn't feel good for either person. Everybody needs to feel like a contributor in order to feel like a valued adult in a partnership. So you want to talk to each other about ways that you can adapt your roles at home in ways that keep it feeling balanced. And I really want to emphasize here sort of the point behind our whole presentation tonight, that as a person with MS, you can really support your support partner's wellness efforts. It's your encouragement, your cheerleading that will help them get over this worry about being selfish or worry about that they have to focus all their attention on you. It is to your benefit and to your support partner's benefit that the support partner engages in the healthy habits we've been talking about, has time for him or herself to relax, to have an MS-free zone, to engage in recreation. It's very helpful if you as a person with MS can give very clear messages when you do need help and when you don't need help, because nobody, even somebody who loves you very much, can read your mind. So the clearer you are in your communications, the less stressful it is for your support partner. Related to using tools and assistive devices or mobility aids, these not only help you stay active and independent, they also help you optimize your safety in light of whatever limitations MS has caused. So if you take responsibility for your own safety by using the tools that are available to you, you free your partner from a lot of stress. That partner can go to work or do other activities and not have to be worried all the time that you're falling or getting hurt or injured in some way. So you have responsibility for your own safety. And you can also identify activities, even if they're things you've never tried before, activities or hobbies that you can enjoy on your own within your abilities, so that your support partner can take some time for him or herself. And as Mandy has talked about so well, when you use mobility aids, you're also expanding the recreational activities you can enjoy together. So with these tips and tools, we think that everybody benefits. Support partners thrive when both people are healthy and well. And as partners, you can really have a good time planning and engaging in wellness promoting activities that you can each do. And as we'll talk about next time on our webinar, when you have a balanced partnership, that really does feel more intimate and satisfying because you're both getting support. So now, Cheryl, do you want to bring us back to Sam and Pam so we can provide our recommendations for them before we have to stop?
Yes. So Sam and Pam, again, married for 18 years, and they have a 10-year-old daughter. I think we've gone through most of these, so I won't read them back to you. But we have some changes coming in terms of progression, it looks like, with Sam, and then the concerns related to his care partner and how she is going to manage all of this. So again, it looks like she has some mild but chronic health issues related to her own back pain. And she is pretty darn tired with just trying to keep it all together. So what I'd like to do then is let's hear from our audience, okay? So I think we have our polling question is next. So what should Pam do related to this scenario? What do you think would be what would be the best thing for her to do to start to gain a little bit better insight and some better management of this situation? Interesting. Nobody said visit with a financial partner. Interesting. So, but talking with Sam about his mobility situation and looking at some mobility aids to conserve energy seems to be the number one thing. Again, seeking help at home is also an option. It looked like that one was probably the second most popular, and a primary care physician for perhaps some of her own needs to be addressed. So yes, I like the energy conservation one with the mobility device. I can speak to that from a personal level too. In terms of my spouse, when he made that decision, he was absolutely amazed at how much easier it was to get through life when he started to use an assisted device in a wheelchair. So made a huge impact in our lives. So, so medical wellness in regards to this couple for Pam specifically. She needs to ask her spouse if it's okay to go ahead and speak to his providers. That might be a nice insight that she can give to his either primary care doctor or neurologist, physical therapist, whoever the provider may be. She also needs to, again, address her own health needs by seeing a physician. She needs to make a commitment to better sleep. It's a little more difficult than it sounds, but with her fatigue issues, sleep might be the best thing. Actually, leaving things go may give you more energy to get more things done the following day. Related to her physical wellness, she should again, talk about the benefits of possible somewhat adaptive equipment, work with her physical therapy for her own issues, and her emotional wellness, again, learn to communicate her needs and look for some resources and such. So, and pay attention to her mood. I think the issue related to depression is a whole another topic, but yes, care partners also can experience depression. So.
All right. Well, I'd just like to jump in here and thank all of our presenters for providing some expertise to help support partners prioritize their wellness. So we do have time for a few questions before we close out for the day. So our first question is, Mandy, I want to direct this one to you first. So at first I thought it was fatigue that was preventing my partner with MS from wanting to do activities. But now he just randomly decides he wants to do something. So how can I help motivate my partner with MS to do more activities together on a consistent basis?
Right. So I think it sounds like we need to start with just educating about fatigue. So there's primary fatigue that happens as a result of the disease itself, the demyelination and the reduced nerve conduction. But then there's also fatigue related to secondary issues, like, for example, sleep hygiene, poor nutrition, perhaps deconditioning. So I think figuring out what's contributing to fatigue and kind of to try to focus in on that pattern a little bit more might be a way to help this couple problem solve a way to be more physically active, either together or independently.
You know, I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, the support partner seems to be saying that her partner with MS is randomly choosing activities to do, and it sounds as though she's feeling a little left out. So to Mandy's point, I think it's important to have a conversation about activities that you can each do alone that are satisfying, enjoyable, and healthy and keep you active, but also carving out a certain amount of time in every week, for example, for things that you can be active at together. And maybe some couples struggle figuring out what the proportion should be of together exercises versus alone, but starting with that conversation so that if he does continue to be physically active, she doesn't feel left out, and maybe they can identify at least some things that they can do together if she speaks up and says, I really would like to do a little bit more together with you.
And Cheryl, anything from your standpoint?
Yeah, I just think it's, again, it just reflects back on the importance of balance with activities for the care partner themselves and also activities that they can do together. And the speaking up piece, I think, is very critical because, again, as a care partner, sometimes we again want to support our loved one with MS, and so we let them choose and make a lot of decisions, but and then sometimes that can lead to resentment and such. So I think it's very important that you each have individual activities, which I think is very good and healthy for a relationship, but also a joint decision, if at all possible, related to activities you can do together, or at least a compromise, let's put it that way, right?
Okay. All right. And another kind of physical question for Mandy. How do you know how much to exercise in any given day?
Right. So the answer could be a little bit different for people living with MS as it could be for support partners. So I think it's key to have a conversation or have a consultation with a exercise physiologist or a PT who can evaluate abilities and then make a good exercise recommendation that's appropriate. But I also think a good general rule of thumb is what I like to call the 2-hour rule, that if you don't feel as good 2 hours after exercise as you did when you first started, in other words, you don't kind of return to your baseline, then you did too much. So think of that 2-hour rule. That could be applicable to both people with MS and they're having their symptoms subside and return to baseline after exercise, and also people without MS just feeling like they've recovered from a hard workout.
Great, that's perfect. Now, we're encouraging support partners to speak up and tell their loved one with MS the things that they need to fill their bucket. But what if somebody their partner is supporting them to focus on their own needs, but that support partner just keeps feeling guilty because their loved one can't do some of the things they're doing? Roz, how might somebody start to move past that?
I think communication is sort of the starting point for any challenge like this. I hope that all the information we've given tonight has relieved some of those guilt feelings. Taking care of yourself enjoying life. Those are not things to feel guilty about. They're just things to do in proportion to all of your other activities and responsibilities. So I think it's trying to put the guilt behind you and instead just sit down with your loved one and say, what's reasonable here? I would like some time in my week to do these things that are really important to me or that I enjoy. How can we schedule that so that you don't feel neglected and I don't have to feel guilty or worried about your safety while I'm gone? And also, what are some things you might do to entertain yourself or have fun while I'm doing the things that are important to me? And then we can get together and share what we've been doing. I think it starts with conversation.
And now, Cheryl, do you remember, or do you still have those feelings of guilt at all in your situation?
You know, I think we all struggle with them. I as a care partner, but also as a care provider, sometimes I think I have more guilt on the latter. But as a support partner, I think I've learned that it's probably better for both of us if we each have our own activities. My spouse is incredibly independent and does a lot of amazing things, adaptive skiing and hand cycling and such, and those are wonderful things. I get to come along and kind of participate and watch a little bit, so that's something we do together. But we also have very specific activities too that we can do apart. And I think when you get the opportunity to do something like, again, my husband doing his hand cycling and stuff, and you can see that you can make it work, it is pretty impressive, and it also helps relieve a lot of the guilt. Once you see it work, it's like that's beautiful. So.
Right.
All right. Well, we have time for one more question. So, what are the signs that my support partner may be suffering from burnout? And Cheryl, do you want to take the lead on that one?
Yes, that is a very real issue in managing a chronic illness over a long period of time. Some of the first things that I always look at, and I oftentimes will discuss this, particularly as a provider, is the irritability. We forget that irritability of either the person with MS or irritability of the care partner are oftentimes indications of depression, etc. So the other thing too is that I tend to look at is if you start to see a caregiver struggling with getting to appointments, or maybe starting to put out the wrong medications and such. Part of that would be, to me, signs that maybe things aren't, that care partner is pretty burned out and may actually need some support person. Looking at getting some assistance with housekeeping, so you don't have to worry about cleaning and such. Simple things like that can really take some worries and burdens off of the support partner. And hopefully reduce burnout.
Mandy, did you have anything to share?
Yeah, I was just going to add, if it's burnout related to like the physical demands of caregiving, so for example, transferring or helping with walking or helping with some of the activities of daily living, then I think that would be a time to re-engage the rehab team. Are there other tools? Are there other devices? Are there other strategies or techniques that could be employed that could be making this easier for everyone?
And Roz, did you have anything?
Yeah, I think I would just, I'd like to emphasize what Cheryl said about irritability often being a sign of depression. I just can't emphasize enough how common depression is in support partners of people with chronic illnesses, not just MS. And when you see irritability, when you see disrupted sleep, or if a person stops seeming as attentive or even isn't as gentle when providing hands-on assistance, or isn't as mindful of things, those can all be signs that people are feeling burned out or at the end of their rope. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about. There's nothing to feel ashamed about this. It just means that a very good, strong person has kind of reached a limit and needs some support and resources. And again, that's an ideal time to talk to the MS navigators at the society. They are all trained counselors or social workers. They understand the experiences of support partners. And so you can just talk and say, I'm feeling pretty maxed out, or I'm thinking that my support partner is pretty maxed out. Can you recommend some resources in our area that might provide some respite so that I can be cared for while my support partner gets some time off, or some counseling services that might be available. Burnout is real, and we want to step in there before it gets out of control.
All right. Some great information there, and that's all the time we have for our presentation portion tonight. So I just want to thank Cheryl, Mandy, and Roz again for their valuable information. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
So you're going to receive an email tomorrow night with the recording of this presentation and a corresponding podcast on prioritizing your emotional and physical well-being for you to check out. So if you'd like to find out more information about this topic, the National MS Society has a variety of brochures and video segments for caregivers that can be accessed on their website, nationalmssociety.org. We'll also send you a full list of resources in our follow-up email. For those of you looking to kick your smoking habit, here are the resources that Cheryl mentioned during her presentation that we'll also send to you in that follow-up email. Be sure to check out the rest of our online resources on the Can Do MS website, cando-ms.org, where you can find archived webinars, Can Do on demand, and library articles. You can also submit a question to ask the Can Do team, which will be answered by one of our MS team experts. The next presentation in our Embracing Carer series will be on Tuesday, October 30th at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll cover the topic relationships. So for those of you participating live tonight, you'll see a survey appear on your computer screen. Please take a moment to complete the survey and share your input. Your feedback helps us continue to improve these webinars. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and I hope you have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Night, everybody.
Thank you.